Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the webinar, The Dynamic Leaders 5-Stage Application Cycle. We're going to give everyone just a few more minutes to sign on. I see a lot of you jumping on the line right now. We'll get started in just a moment. All right, we'll go ahead and kick it off. Hope you're having a lovely day. Today's webinar is sponsored by Interlogix and Honeywell. My name is Jillian Bateman, and I'm the Chief Development Officer for ESA. And I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for joining us. Terri Peters, Special Operations Senior Leader and CEO of Leader Solutions and Decision Support, has designed a 5-stage leadership application cycle after 30+ years of application and 10 years of researching and working with successful leaders across diverse industries. In today's session, we're going to take a look at that application cycle and explore how you can evolve the way you tackle challenges and face opportunities. Today, Terri is going to walk you through the fundamentals of leading effectively. I'm going to turn the mic over to Terri in just a moment, but I wanted to give you some background on today's speaker and cover just a few housekeeping notes before we launch. From planning and executing special ops missions to guiding small businesses through proven growth strategies, Terri Peters is a hands-on leader that will walk you through best practices with tangible takeaways. Today's webinar will give you just a taste of what you can expect to experience in a deeper dive in the Rising Leaders programming at the Leadership Summit, being held January 28th through the 31st in Austin, Texas. Now, this is no traditional programming. Participants will work out together in the morning, engage in interactive activities and education sessions, all designed to deliver unparalleled bonds and connections and to foster activities and attitudes that are going to make a difference in your top and bottom lines. So if you're a rising leader, I absolutely urge you to head over to esasummit.com to check out the Rising Leaders programming. And if you're a CEO, I encourage you to come to the Leadership Summit and check out the Rising Leaders program for somebody that has potential from your company. I guarantee it will pay dividends. So let's get started. First, all callers will be muted for the duration of this webinar. At any time, feel free to ask a question by clicking into that section of your control panel. We will be fielding questions to Terri, our speaker, during Q&A sessions throughout the webinar. A recording of this webinar will be made available in the resource library on esaweb.org at the end of the day. And for your convenience, we will automatically email you a link to the video recording. Without further ado, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Terri Peters.
Thank you, Jillian. Good afternoon, everyone. It is fantastic to be with you again. If you've spent time with me in the past, you know that I really enjoy our interactions because I not only have the opportunity to interact with you and learn, but also truly enjoy sharing those lessons that we've captured over these many years of working with many companies and organizations, as well as leading organizations through dynamic challenges and through change over the years. As we start today, I'd like to just reflect a little bit on the road to here. You know, as Jillian mentioned, you know, I have been leading others for over 3 decades now, and I've learned a great deal through that process. It has not been a simplistic path, as all of you know, when you're leading others. And in the last 8 years, since we established LSDS, we've had the wonderful opportunities to work with companies of large and small size all over the United States and companies that are affecting global populations. It has been an unbelievably challenging undertaking and one that has let us learn so much. We really started working on the lessons that the topic that we'll cover today. I really began to work on it in earnest, capturing this leadership application cycle, probably while leading you know, about 10,000 folks around the globe in late 2008, 2009, really when I was stretched at my capacity to make sure that I was doing the right thing by the entire scope and spectrum of the organization and the enterprise of people that were working for us for many things. Since LSDS was working with so many companies, I also captured a great deal of lessons from leaders who were successful, as well as leaders we were working with, to really put something together that I think will really give you a lot of the things to accomplish as you go through your path of leadership. It's important to note that there are a lot of things that we'll cover today, and the goal of today is just to increase leader effectiveness. By increasing leader effectiveness, we create a dynamic impact for the organization, and hopefully, that impact that you receive and you cause in the organization is extremely positive. So, with that being said, let's begin. So, the five-stage application process to lead and manage covers 5 specific areas: lead yourself, lead people, lead and manage projects and organizations, projects and programs, lead and manage the organization, and communication. You'll note that I've intertwined lead and manage in this presentation, and we have for a very long time. In recent months, I've been involved in several conversations where there was this pursuit of separating either leadership or management competencies. And after many years of studying and applying leadership, I just don't agree with separating the two. The most effective leaders that I've ever met are also good managers, and vice versa. The most effective and capable managers I've ever met are also good leaders. So you'll see us intertwine those terms today as we work through this. But at the end of the day, it's really about total application. A few thoughts as we begin to tackle this process. LSDS focuses heavily on leadership, management, and best practices, but we're not immune from those challenges all leaders face. I do not pretend to be the best leader out there, but I do study this and spend an incredible amount of time of my waking days learning from leaders and applying best practices. Every organization is very different, and as such, accomplishing these critical tasks often needs very different approaches. Today, we'll explore these areas and gain a better perspective on what works. As we develop these areas of application, we realize there's no way we can ever give every leader every answer. Here we'll explore these in enough detail to shed light on select areas, and when we see each other in January, we'll dive into these in great detail. We've broken these areas down into 5 major focus areas for leaders and managers, and it's important to understand that the application process is never ending. As you all know, if you're leading others, it's extremely challenging work, and it's something that takes a great deal of your time and effort. So without further ado, let's dive into leading yourself. I start with lead yourself in everything we do, because leading yourself is a very simple concept, but leading yourself is, as we all know, is extremely important. As you begin to think about what it takes to lead yourself, many of you have great habits every day. But my estimation is when you reflect on your best days, you'll realize that many of these tasks that we've stated here are aligned with those. Those behaviors you apply in your most successful days can be replicated and refined to reduce the amount of luck you need to have a successful day. And what you'll find more and more is that there is just a whole lot of goodness that goes in to leading yourself and finding that right balance. So I'll dive into these a little bit. When we talk about applying the discipline every day, what we're really talking about there is those disciplines to think, to learn, stress inoculation, and to make yourself a better you. Often when we find that we are losing our way, or we're not accomplishing those things we want, the first thing that we really give up are those healthy routines that we have, and we begin to compromise. And later on, you'll notice I've talked about applying balance in all things. Important to know that applying the discipline every day to become a better you also directly connects to applying balance in all things. Seeking responsibility and accepting responsibility allows you to avoid complacency, and then more importantly, it speaks to applying total ownership. Accepting responsibility means that whatever task you have, whatever your mission is, means that you own it, total ownership, and you really get into the details that matter, and you also delegate and allow those other things to work. But on a given day, seeking responsibility and knowing what you're responsible for is critical for you as a leader. We all know it, but sometimes especially when pressure's high, sometimes it's uncertain exactly where we should go in that space. I put don't waste time. And it's difficult, as we all know, in our daily schedules to have a purpose for everything you're doing, for applying your time. But it's important to, as you work your calendars and as you apply your time, to understand that where you are now is the most important place to be. For this webinar alone, you've qualified time, and you've stated that this is the place where you want and need to be, um, for many reasons. One, you want to understand more. Second, you want to gain insight, and third, if you've interacted with us before, you know that these are pretty positive interactions that we have. The same goes when you're circulating amongst your organization or you're spending time wherever that is. It should be the most important place to be. Um, if you, as you go through your day, the most important place to be may not be work. Remember, there are a lot of places that your time is needed. Family, community, personal fitness, giving back to those things that matter to you. The best people we see are actively weighing their time application and striving to seek that balance of where their time goes. The next one is be present and be genuine in your dealings with others. What that means to us is mentally commit to the task at hand and the applied time. Eliminate distractors in meetings, in conversations and planning sessions, one-on-one feedback specifically. In many instances, in some of our breakouts, we ask people to put together, tell us the most effective one-on-ones that you have, where people are really sharing ideas or giving performance feedback. And all of them come with no distractions. So being genuine, be present where you are, really important to when you're applying time with other people. Some of the best leaders I've ever met don't have a concept of time, or they somehow manage to erase time when you're sharing time with them. There is no, hey, I've got to go now because in 15 minutes I have to be someplace. It really is, this time matters. Let's get the most out of it and let's move forward. Apply balance in all things. There's a lot to get here. So I guess the best way to go after this is to ask you a question. When you begin to lose balance, in your life or in your work application, what are some of the symptoms you display, or what are the second order effects that you feel if you begin to lose balance? Feel free to send those to Jillian. We'll review some of those. Take a second and capture those and send them if you don't mind. While you're working on that, I'll tell you what happens to me. The first thing that happens to me every day, I am out of the door about 5:30 in the morning to do something physical. It doesn't, as I age, it's not too extreme, but it's definitely something physical every day. When I begin to lose balance, the first place that I compromise is that time in the morning. Historically, if there's a project due or a program, or I'm going to spend time with leaders, for some reason, I'll make the conscious decision to cut that time, and then it begins. The concept of finding that or applying that critical stress inoculation now leaves my day, which throws out the normal rhythms and changes my mood in the morning. And then there's a cascading effect that occurs until after about 2 or 3 days of losing this balance, I begin to have an edge. I'm much more difficult to approach. And then if things are working like they're supposed to, if I begin to go this way, someone that works near me or someone that's working close to me asks me a few questions. Are you out of balance? Do you need some time off? What can we do to help? And those are those subtle indicators that we need to I need to strike that balance again. All of us seek constantly to apply and achieve that balance, but it is extremely important. It's extremely challenging to get that done. The next one is you don't have to know everything, but you must have a process to make informed decisions. Uh, Often when we're developing young leaders, we'll tell them that to reduce stress, you don't have to know everything. But what we all know, the more challenging the job is, the more important the work is, the more lasting effects of those decisions, and the less you get away from the technical knowledge needed. You absolutely must have a plan to achieve, to gain the information, make those decisions, and then understand the process of those decisions. When you make decisions, we all know this, but sometimes when we're working with companies that are struggling, this is one of those areas that's failed. Make decisions from a base of integrity and honesty. Focus on the greater good. it's not about self. We all know that when we're leading others, but really focused on the greater good. What are the right decisions to make? I often when we talk to leaders about making decisions, we work through whenever they have to let someone go, when it's time to offboard someone. And leaders are often they often struggle with this challenge of letting someone go. And what I tell them consistently is make decisions based off the greater good. If it's the best for the organization to let that person go, for a number of reasons, it's the right thing to let them go. Making decisions in a timely manner is extremely important. Being humble in your success. Arrogance defeats teamwork and communication. Often I see leaders, especially startups that have exploded over time and really gotten very large. Those startups, those leaders at some point begin, as I would say, begin to believe the things that are written about them, and as such become just a little distant from the people that matter. Make it a little bit harder to interact with them. Be humble. I've interacted with many of you, and I can tell you that ESA by and large are some of the most humble professional people that I've ever met in my life. And I think we all come to that from a place of genuine care for others. And then the last one I added, because a very good leader, a great friend of mine, a general named David Friedovich, who has led me in many tough spots around the earth. When I gave him this list to review, I didn't have earn the loyalty of those you lead, and he corrected it within about 5 minutes, and he said, "Hey, I've read everything, but I don't see this." And he said, "Everything you do, every single effort you undertake, should be to earn the loyalty of those you lead." And I think it's extremely important. Every once in a while, I think you should, just look back and say, am I doing those things that truly earn the loyalty of those that I lead? Do they respect me, and am I respectful of their time and everything that makes the organization better? I'll take questions on this slide, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Terri, I have a question here. What would be an example of one of the things that you would do to earn the loyalty of those you lead?
So I think it's extremely important. I think part of that is ensuring several aspects here. Earn the loyalty of those you lead in word and deed. Be true to yourself and be true to the organization. Be honest in the dealings with people. Know why you make the decisions that you're making and share the reasoning for that on a given day. At the end of the day, loyalty is respect. It's a combination of respect and understanding the value of those people that you have to get moving to accomplish missions. Earning that loyalty, not taking them for granted, and spending genuine time with them, and then talking to them about the decisions that you're making or the ones you have made, so they understand your perspective and they understand the why of it. Consistent application from a professional base ensures that the loyalty of those you lead will be there. As we talk about organizational application in just a little bit, one of the things we're going to talk about is circulation and getting out to see those people. These two are tied hand in hand to me. Understanding how the things you're doing and communicating those, as well as making sure that you weigh those, weigh the things that matter to people in your decision cycle. Any more?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Next, I want to talk about leading and managing people. When we talk about people, people are unique. They require guidance and direction, compassion, empathy, focus, and so much more. They are arguably your most valuable commodity, and they are often overlooked. When I was at on Fort Bragg not long ago, and I was speaking with the commanding general of the Special Warfare Center, and we talked about two significant challenges that our special operations forces are dealing with. One is the ability to hire and attract the right people. At the end of the day, every business and every person represented on this call is looking for almost the exact same people that our special operations forces are looking for. intelligent, bright problem solvers. The other challenge they're dealing with is an exodus of people who have really put a lot out there on the line for many, many years. And it comes back to this process of, attracting, hiring, onboarding, and then developing talent. Um, it is a challenge to find, keep, and develop the right people. We all know that. The process by which you attract them, where are you looking? How are you looking? How are you letting them know? Some companies, these are very elaborate processes they go through to really begin to, attract people at, early on. Others, it comes down to having a great brand and great reputation, and then hiring people through a very deliberate process. And then the next critical step is onboarding. And often when we work with people, when we find ourselves working with organizations, this last part of this of develop talent often is it's a real challenge. And when I talk with leaders about building programs and developing talent, often I get two critical pushbacks. One, we don't have the resources, and two, we don't have the time. And the discussions I have with them after, or once this is brought up, I say, okay, you don't have the resources. If you have talented people and they can speak to each other, you've got some great resources there. You can coach, mentor, and then figure out where people go in the organization. And the last one is time, and we just don't have the time to do this. And I argue over the ability to apply time, because I'll take specific points and I'll say, okay, if you don't have the time to do this, how does it work when that person's on vacation or when other leaders are on vacation? Do you support their vacation time? And the answer is almost always yes. And if you can fence that time for vacation, you can find small increments of time to help develop your talent. At the end of the day, the communication process, great people attract great people. Disenfranchised and disenchanted and unhappy people will turn great people away. That environment you've created, I've been in many organizations that are part of the ESA family, and there are incredibly warm environments that where employees are happy, they're telling other people about their work environment, and they're attracting people. How you hire and onboard them is extremely critical. Later, we're going to talk about projects and programs and ensuring that people are aligned to the task, aligned to the mission, aligned to the strategic objectives of the organization. That's where that onboarding piece takes shape. Pairing them with someone who can bring them into the organization and give them the best snapshot of your culture, extremely important. Dismiss anyone without the moral character to be part of your team. This gets at what is okay and what's not okay in your organization. We talk about moral character. That's something that every organization looks at, and these are 99% of the time no fails. But often, if we find a place where there is someone of questionable moral character still on the payroll, there's oftentimes we find some connection to a senior leader, and there's also a blind spot that's somehow built into that decision. And what we'll tell you is, if you don't have those things that are no kidding, these are no fails, and we'll let you go for this, then you're going to run into those challenges that begin to chip away at the goodness of your culture, or let opportunities to reinforce your culture pass. And it's extremely important that this is just there. Often in the news we'll see company X or Y or organization X or Y that's having an issue with someone, and you'll ask yourself, how is that person allowed to stay there? And I'll tell you, it's because leaders don't have the intestinal fortitude to just step forth and say that person shouldn't be here and let them go. Item 3 is establish and actively manage roles, responsibilities, and authorities from the onset. This often comes into play when we're expanding or we're developing new roles and responsibilities. It's important to understand that you know if you ask yourself, find yourself asking, who's the decision maker for this after something's working, this is probably a focus area. As companies expand, they often develop new roles. Encourage the responsibilities and authorities to be built at the same time. What we find, if these aren't all aligned, is you've got a lot of people who either having a lot of overlap in their decision making process, or there's a huge gap, and usually it's the latter with respect to who owns this decision. And then With responsibilities, this gets into that specific focus area of, as you work on projects and programs, who is ensuring that it's done completely, and how do those roles overlap? Extremely important to work on that, and often we map that out. We'll simply draw on a dry erase board. Here's what everybody's doing. Here's where their roles and responsibilities are, and then what authorities do they have? Remember, just because someone has authorities or asks for authorities doesn't mean those authorities are the right place. More importantly, when authority should be leveraged for long-term, more strategic decisions, that's historically at more senior levels, but may not always have to be. Sometimes our marketing decisions are, with the marketing lead, a marketing director, and don't necessarily need to go through a cleansing process or a scrubbing process. Other times, depending on the sensitivities of what you're working on, they absolutely do. Important to understand those. And often, if you get leaders who come to you, or you're finding yourself talking to your boss about, I'm just not sure what I should be doing, often that's mapped back to understanding roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Avoid blind spots. This one is extremely challenging. And it's arguably one of the harder parts of building an environment, especially if you started your business small and you had several good friends who came with you to the small business and that business has grown, or family members or others who you're very close with, or people that were there at the startup and became that close to you. The challenge of scaling and the challenge of growing in companies and is ensuring that you continue to notice and put the right people in the right jobs through scale, not because they've been with you the longest. If you've built the organization correctly, you'll have people that come to you to help you map out those biases, and they'll give you those reflections, and that's an important part of it. Critical to making sure that this works is building an environment of trust and communications, and that helps others find the courage to up about perceived biases. Often these biases are at the very senior leadership levels, and it's just one, or a perception of bias is at the very senior leadership levels. And it's important to circulate and ensure that people have the opportunity and have an environment filled with trust to ask those questions. Extremely important part of this to ensure that those blind spots, if noticed, someone can have the discussion with you. The last one of this is, or the next one is, is circulate often. Engage across all components and subcomponents consistently. This one, if the company you work with is large and your responsibilities scale, this one can be a challenge, because often people are pulled into specific areas of focus, and many times they won't circulate into those areas that they don't feel a need to get to. Or I've seen certain leaders who, if they're working with a certain population that's just unhappy or disenfranchised, they won't find themselves into that. They won't find themselves circulating in that space deliberately, because they're afraid of pushback or just dealing with unhappy people. And my argument is that's where you should spend more of your time. Any place that hasn't seen you recently deserves your time, and any place that is a place where there are people who are just unhappy or not as happy as everybody else, or are unsure of their work efforts, that's a place to spend your time. It is extremely important, and I encourage you to keep a calendar or a note or log of where you're spending your time, and then figure out where your time is getting used and where it's not. Reflecting on an active calendar is a great way to let yourself understand exactly where you're spending time and where you're not. Coach, mentor, and assist. And if I were to ask you by Wednesday when we have this webinar, how many people have you actively coached or mentored this week? Many of you that have tuned in would say 1, 3, 5, or more. Most of our leaders are actively doing this. The challenge is growing that so that other people in your organization are also mentoring. Last year, we undertook with a company mapping out mentor skills, the competencies and skills of mentors, and then really building a catalog of what those skills of those mentors were, and then how do we balance that time of where mentors are spending their time? Because if you're really good at bringing people to the next level, there was an ever increasing demand for you to do that. Finding that practical balance there is extremely important, but also noting and getting feedback on other mentors where their skill sets truly lie. I believe in the saying that, mentees find mentors, but that's if the mentee has an understanding of where mentors are and what those skills of those mentors are. And I think that's an important part of it. But if you find yourself with the opportunity to coach and mentor, my recommendation is always take it. If you're leading others, it's a great way to let people understand what the things you believe in. It's also a great way to level up, and it's a critical step in building a professional development atmosphere around you. The last bullet on this is cultivate and grow leaders. As we get ready to head into questions, one of the things I'd also like to get your feedback on is, what I'd like to get a sense of what developmental processes you have. We work with numerous organizations. Some of those organizations have professional development sessions where internally they're sharing and developing their leaders. Others assist with everything from college tuition to guest speakers to team building events and on and on and on. Others have a real genuine career map that they're working off of. So as we head into questions for this slide, I'd love to also get feedback on, what are you doing, and what programs have you seen or are applying that really help you grow productive teams and those leaders who lead them. With that being said, I'll take your questions for this slide. Okay.
Feel free to type those questions into the control panel under questions. And you can also just type in just observations there if you'd like as well. This brings up kind of a funny story, Terri. I was watching this video about a leader who his team was doing phenomenal, and he really wanted to think about a way that he could really thank them for what they were doing, because they were meeting their deadlines above and beyond. They were making profits. They were making him look really good as a new leader for the company. And so, he went down to the pit, I'll call it, where all their cubicles were, and he said, guys, I really want to take you out for drinks after work, let's say on Thursday. I really appreciate all the work you're doing, and, you're doing a great job. And so he got there on Thursday, and about half the people showed up, and he just scratched his head, and he asked one of them, and one of them was candid and said, some of us don't drink. Some of us want to spend time with our families. And so he thought, oh man, and went back to the office with pie on his face and said, okay, this time I've got something. So he went to the pit and said, hey guys, you're doing a great job. I want to invite you all on a canoeing trip next weekend so that we can spend some time together. And same thing happened. Half the people showed up. And what he realized was he was projecting himself onto his team. And so when he actually started to kind of listen and watch and show and see what was valuable to him, to the people on the team, it was, hey, let's get lunch together. Let's bring pizza in for everybody, or something like that. And some of what you said kind of reminded me of that.
No, you're absolutely right. Jillian, I was working with a leader in Redwood, California, about 15 months ago, and the challenge this leader faced in a nutshell was that he hadn't personalized himself to his team. He was brought in to take over a team of about 15 people in a very large company, and he called me up, and I had had a relationship with him before, and he called me and said, "Hey, can you come spend some time with my team, and really just tell me what you think?" So I walked in the office, assessed the atmosphere, and then I just went to his team. They were working, and I sat down with them, and I said, "Hey, everybody, here's who I am. Here's what I do. I just like to understand what you do." And which is something I've learned to do through these years. I don't pretend to know your job. Don't pretend to be an expert in your job. So just help me understand what you do. So this introduction led to a question and answer session, which led to just leadership discussions and all these other things. So he finished. I met with him, and I said, "What did you think of that?" Because he stood nearby, and he said, "That was phenomenal." I said, "Okay, how do you do this? How do you interact with your team?" And same type of concept. He goes, "Well, I I pick where we go once a month. We go do something, and when we go do it, and I said, what's the attendance like? And he said, about 40%, not a little under half. And I said, have you ever asked them to figure out what they want to do and maybe offer it up for options and then support them in those things? And then back to the original question, do you find yourself sitting with them often just to engage and learn what they're doing, truly understand the value of what they're doing and what they're providing the organization? And he said, no, I'm not comfortable in that space. And I said, what are you uncomfortable about? And he said, well, they're going to ask me questions and I'm not sure that I want to answer those. And this took on a whole different approach to this. And I said, look, if you can't be genuine when you're there with your people, they're not going to engage you, and you're going to have a cascade of problems because you're just trying to do something you saw somewhere, take team out to lunch or take team out to dinner, when there's no goodness behind it. You're just really kind of applying a tactical checklist to a human, and it never works that way. So we worked with him so that he would absolutely begin to turn this over to the team and sit with the team, even as uncomfortable as he was. And then 90 days later, you stop back in to see him, and you walk in the office, and no longer is it this clinical place of where no one's talking. You walk in and there's people standing together, they're laughing, meetings are effective, but there's also just an even balance to them, and there's a goodness in the room, there's open engagement across. And when you walk in there and you realize that here's a leader who had the ability to understand and then begin to apply systematically those things that allow them to one be more human in the moment, but also really get at understanding the people that he was responsible for, and the dynamics of the team had, and the effectiveness and productivity of the team had changed completely in 90 days. Pretty amazing to watch. But the ability to be genuine and really not project yourself onto a team, just important. In that session, I told this young man, I said, this young leader, I said, at the end of the day, if you think of yourself of leading a team, that at the end of the day, you're a member of the team who has to go to meetings and who periodically has to make decisions. That's the right way to think of this whole leading a team. If you think of the team as something that was given to you or issued to you, or that you now have total control of, it never works out well. This is definitely a let's all do this together kind of concept, and that's something that often leaders just miss in that moment, and I think it's an extremely important part of it. Thank you for that, Jillian.
Sure. We've got a couple questions coming in
Yes, sir.
now. Any tips for coaching underperforming team members?
Yeah, the challenge with underperforming team members that I have dealt with consistently is finding what is the thing that motivates them. In my own company, small company, but they're no different than the large organizations that I've led. Finding talent management is one of the primary reasons that I've found for underperforming people. I have skill sets that are not being applied. I have skill sets that are not appreciated, and I'm not sure what my real purpose here is, or if I can find that thing that provides the most worth. Now, every once in a while, so if you can tackle that, you can really get at those areas, you're going to find the lights come on. First, now you're going to inspire, you're going to motivate, and then that person's going to want to do more. If it's one of those jobs where the person just isn't the right cut for the job, in essence, they're not motivated, they're minimal performers. Part of that is just getting that out in a very clear, very professional approach to it. But finding motivations is the number one thing that I can tell you that really turns people around and really begins to inspire them and move them. If you've got the ability to do that, if your company or wherever you're working has the ability just to give them a little bit more, sometimes it's an additional responsibility. Someone has a genuine desire to educate. Well, perhaps they can put together a professional development session for you. Their job doesn't require it on a daily basis. Maybe it's an additional responsibility that you can give them. That very personal conversation of, hey, I notice you're just not really into this, or you're not that happy, or whatever that is, whatever's the right way to approach that. Having that very honest conversation with them is a way to get at that. And sometimes it's, I just don't think you value me, and understanding your actions in this process extremely important. Anything else?
Beautiful. We've got another question here.
Certainly.
Can you expand on great people attract great people? What if you're
Yeah.
misjudging great?
So yeah, so that's a great way. So part of what we look for is, what makes someone great? Is it their attitude? Is it their ability to produce? Is it their ability to grow teams? Is it their ability to manage time well? There are many different aspects of what makes someone really great. And then the second part of that is, how does the organization respond to that person who's really giving it their all? We'll talk in a future slide of, celebrating your all-stars and celebrating successes. If that person that's there who is doing great work for you genuinely feels like this is a place that allows you to grow and become a better you, they're going to tell their friends about it. That if they're just doing great incremental things, hey, I came to work early, I'm doing a few great things. Part of this is the atmosphere that you create, that overall culture of the organization. But knowing, we all have a good sense of what is an excellent person in this space. Sometimes it's technical competencies, other times it's leadership skills, sometimes it's that blend of both. Whatever those things are, if you got the ability to recognize that and let people know, they're going to be really happy to come to work. I was in Statesville, North Carolina, last year at Lake Norman Security, and I did meetings with the employees there. And one of the most powerful things that I've ever been told by an employee is that the person said, "I feel like when I leave home, I drive a few miles and I come to my second home. Um, I would do anything for this company, and I do anything for the leadership here." And I thought, man, if you could bottle that success model, how magical that is. Because he told everybody, and I asked him, do you tell other people you work here? He goes, I'm so proud to work here. I tell everybody. And he was still relatively young in the company. And my thought was, I can only imagine, 3 to 5 years down the road, if you're still this excited, you've been there for a few years already, how many people you're going to approach and interact who understand this is a great place to work. So one, there's an inspiration there. Two, there's motivation, and three, there's the ability to make the team better. Often, those people who have that right approach for the company are going to self-select. This person's a good person, but I don't really want to. I don't really want to invite them to our company if I don't think they're the right fit. So empowering people, letting them know what you're looking for, is also part of that process.
Alrighty, I'd say let's move to the next slide.
Yes. So next is lead and manage projects and programs. So we find ourselves often as a company coming to look in on and be part of either the education process for managing projects and programs, or doing some analysis when projects and programs aren't delivering. Um, I was on the call last week with a company that's having some challenges with their sales department, and that company said, "Hey, here's in essence the atmosphere that our sales department has." And I asked, in essence, these questions. And I said, is there production expectations? Do we know what exactly this department's gonna work on? By the time this conversation was over, I wrote a note back to the senior leader I was working with and said, yeah, I would recommend that you work on a few areas just based off our conversation, but here's some things that I know that will help you. And the first one, whether it's a project, a program, when you articulate the project, production expectations, and also create and apply accountability practices. When I first began to work in this space, when LSDS was first formed, I found myself in a company in California that was a startup in a technical field, and it was the company had an amazing product. They were growing at an exceptional rate, and one of the challenges that they had at the time, they had no real accountability processes. So in essence, you'd go into small meetings rooms, scrums were being conducted, and they'd have a backlog. But if you missed a backlog, you missed deliverables for weeks on end. There was no real accountability process. And my first question was, how long, if I work here, can I not make a deadline before somebody cares? And the answer was indefinitely, because we think you're really talented. And I just smiled and I thought, I don't know how long this is going to go. And so I made some recommendations when I left, spent 2 days there. And I said, the first thing I'd like to figure out is, how leaders are interacting with people who don't really account for their actions, and build an accountability model. I went back a year later and I spent some time with them again. They asked me to come back out, and I remember that from my notes. And I asked, how's accountability now? And they had built in an excellent model of, hey, if we miss two deadlines, then there's a leader intervention there that says, what do you need? What resources or what support do you need to begin to make this happen? And if there is none, then it fell back on that individual. And accountability practices were built. But as you build a project or a program and you articulate that, several things have to be built into that. Here's what we're doing, here's a desired outcome, and how it's going to align with the overall strategy of the organization. And then as you get into that piece, is before you take on this challenge of actually building it or building the next phase of it, figure out how the ideation process is going to work. Everyone who's working on the project has an idea. The ability to set that into a format where people can have a discussion, whether it's a phase or a phase line or a milestone or a deliverable, whatever it may be, and communicate that and then force a beginning and an end to the ideation process, extremely important. We know all the best ideas don't live with a level of leadership. The challenge is, how do you get those ideas from everybody involved in this process and get them in a concise way? Opening it up, telling everybody what you're going to take on, telegraphing this. We're about to take on this new or evolve this process or program. We want your ideas on those things that we should focus on, areas where this needs attention, any other technical or supporting information that'll help us make it better, and open that up to everyone. And then bring those people into a room and have that discussion with them. If they're in the room and you've selected them as part of this process, ensure that you hear every voice. Many, many times I'm in a room, there'll be brilliant people who are quiet. And in many companies that I find myself, if you're the loudest voice, then you get the most airtime and your ideas are heard. If you're a leader in that space, the recommendation is make sure that you go around the room and get the ideas and thoughts of everyone. If they're shy and don't want to do it in that forum you've got, spend time with them one-on-one and get that as part of that ideation process. And then close it. You can always revisit it later, but then begin to build, begin to build this process out with a production model. And that production model does exactly what that fourth bullet says, or that fifth bullet: align tasks to people, people to teams, teams to mission, and missions to strategy. That sub bullet there, at the end of the day, there should be a clear connection from the work being done at the front line all the way to strategy. When I walk into disenfranchised populations, or I spend time with populations that aren't aligned, or production begins to fail in a certain department, I'll ask, tell me what you do. What do you do on a daily basis? Help me understand that. And then I'll ask them, tell me what this contributes to. Where does this go? And how does this either go, forward or backwards? How does this help support the process? Or how does this get to your clients or your customers? And if that person understands that and they know the value of what they're doing and they understand it, odds are there's great communication there. If they don't understand it, or there are challenges, then often you can find where production or those challenges of capability are not aligned. So as you walk around and you circulate, everybody should know what they're doing, what their team's mission is, and then how that applies to the overall strategy. When we find wasted effort, it's usually in that space right there. Collaboratively develop multiple options to achieve your objectives. This is no more than contingency planning. And this often deals with those things that we know have the potential to happen. Deadlines are going to be missed. The environment's going to change. Client atmospheres are going to change. New technologies are going to be developed. Whatever those are, having multiple options to achieve where you want to go is extremely important. They may not always be built out very clearly as you start, but we know that getting those multiple options, again, through a collaborative process, and this may also be done by phase as you go through a production model. When it comes to delegation, I wrote this two different ways: the task, the purpose, and what does it look like? What's the end state? Or what you want me to do, why you want me to do it, and the effect you want me to achieve. If you can delegate clearly, and then and then you have some understanding of those other things you want done, delegation will work well. I realized recently that a lot of people that they're very reluctant to delegate. You'll know you're reluctant to delegate if you fall into this category. If you say, "Hey, I'd like you to do this," someone does it, and it's not exactly like you wanted it when they bring it back to you, and then instead of working through the process to allow them to grow and develop, you just simply say, "Hey, I'll take this back. I'll finish it." Um, if that's happening to you, I would argue that your delegation process could use a little bit of refinement. Often people say, well, there's just no time. And my counter to that is there was time at the beginning. So if you understand what you want them to do, why they're doing it, and then the effect you want to achieve, there may be some refining input that you need to give them, and there may be some in progress checks to do. But along that process, there's a lot of opportunity to engage there and let that delegation work, very well without having to deal with any of the other problems of not delegating clearly, wasted time, and what have you. As we get down into it, as we go to stakeholders, advisors, and key staff may offer input, but you own the decision and the consequences. I find this where the stakes are higher, this gets to be less clear and less adhered to. I often, when we have, if your company is large enough that you interact with lawyers on a regular basis, or you have key advisory members or a board of directors or any of those types of things, um, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and often politics are involved, or biases and those types of things. But one of the things that I will tell you is if you have to, if you are owning it, then own it. Those advisors, stakeholders, all of those folks, they need to give you input, but the decisions are yours. And if you're unsure about the authorities you have to make decisions, well to the left of making those decisions is where you figure that out. Balancing an accomplishment mission and concern for people. I'm often asked, do I fall on one side of this or the other? People are the most important commodity, so do they outweigh mission? And for me, the answer is no. I absolutely care greatly about every person I've worked with, and most leaders genuinely care about those. But it also accomplishing the mission, not necessarily at this exact moment in time, but if you're in business, if you don't accomplish the mission, you won't have anybody to actually care about because you won't have enough revenue to hire them and keep them working. So you have to accomplish the mission. Finding that balance, I care for you and your family greatly, but we also have to complete this. That's that piece we work off of. Um, Anticipate and prepare for operational and production changes maps right back to having multiple options to achieve your objectives. And it's important to understand that being able to read changes in your atmosphere, where you're working, those things that your clients are going to want and the people around you need, it's a critical skill to be developed over time. With that being said, I'll take questions for leading and managing projects and programs.
We've got some comments here. It sounds like what you said, Terry, resonated with a few folks, but no questions.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to lead the organization. I understanding the environment, operational, cultural, and political takes some time. If you, depending on where you are in the organization, if you're a frontline leader, you understand the culture and the operational environment very clearly most of the time. You may not understand the political environment. If you are very senior, you may think more about the political environment and the culture than you do about the operational environment. Understanding the environment is extremely important as you work through it. Political environments are some of the toughest because they often come back to biases or relationships or some of the other things that are hard to map out. People ask me, well, how do you get rid of some of the political overtures and overtones in an organization? And I would say, bullet 2 and bullet 3 really help you work through those. Articulated and reinforce the organizational values and expectations, and then establish accountable behaviors for yourself and state expectations for others. Many times organizations begin to slide when we don't have accountable behaviors of senior leaders, and we don't state the expectations. Many times when a project is going sideways or an organization helps me to work with them, and I'll say, what are your expectations? Before I come work with any company, I'll say, what are your expectations of me? What are your expectations of LSDS as we work with you? These are great habits to form, so that you understand those expectations. And then accountable behaviors. I will do these things for you by this time. Those are accountable behaviors. And if you don't, then whenever that deadline you've made for yourself is, there should be a compelling reason why you didn't make that work for you, or why you didn't accomplish those things that you've said. And then we also have to figure out with senior leaders, what are the things that you would be dismissed for, or you would step back away from the job for. I think that's extremely important. Learn and grow from failure. We all know this, but it's difficult to do at times. But someone mentioned to me recently, you should also, as importantly, celebrate successes, and I totally agree with it. Having this balanced approach to, hey, this is what made us great. Let's proliferate that, and then also we had a challenge here. Let's learn from it without carrying long-term grudges or impacting lives from the challenges you had. Extremely important. Having processes for each. This project or program is finished, this milestone is achieved, this quarter is over. Let's look at the things that went really well, and let's map out why they went so well. Let's look at the challenges we had, the things that didn't go well, and let's map those out. Extremely important to do that. Celebrate your successes and all-stars. One of the things I'll ask you to do is, figure out when the last time you really truly celebrated your successes and your all-stars. Find out where those are and make it work. Remember, all-stars are episodic. This thing was great. You worked exceptionally well and you made it work. Not, don't fall victim to, you did this thing great, and I'm gonna announce that you're the best employee we've ever had. That's a slippery slope. Recognize successes in the moment and celebrate those. And the last one is establish a process to spot, assess, develop, and support leaders. That's the leadership development cycle in my mind. Finding them, figuring out what they're capable of, developing them, and then supporting them through the process of leadership is an ongoing task. Communications is arguably one of the hardest aspects we have. Whenever we work with any company, we go down to the sixth bullet. Somebody asked me in an elevator recently, says, what does your company really do? And I said, we eliminate telepathy as a form of communication. Often alignment is broken, production is having a glitch. There are challenges throughout. Leaders, there's a gap between leadership levels, lack of understanding of roles, responsibilities, and authorities. And I'll ask, have you actually articulated this in written or verbal form to the people that are involved? What is it? What are your expectations? And often I'll get a response of, no, they just know. And I'll ask, how do they know? And we get back to this concept of telepathy. So as you go through your day and you're managing communications, as you communicate, first, I believe it's almost impossible to over communicate. I think it's important that you communicate across the projects, programs, across the organization, to stakeholders and those people that affect your organization. Critical. Apply a communication loop to messaging and delegation. Tell me what I told you. Tell me what you're hearing from me. Circulating to frontline leaders, circulating to senior leaders to let them know what they believe is going on and clear up misconceptions. Extremely important, because remember, perception is what most of us work off of. Clear communication aligns perception with reality. That is a never-ending task as we work through making the organization better. The last thing that I'll lead you, I want to conduct with you is a case study. In the last hour, we've went through some areas of focus. Lead yourself, lead people, lead projects and programs, lead the organization, and communicate consistently. I'd like you to look at Elon Musk. I did a little research and asked and pulled up Elon Musk, from 7 August to 29 September. These are some of the headlines that made the news in that period. And I'd like you to look at what's happened to Elon Musk, what's happened to Tesla, and then what happened on the 29th of September. As you look at these things, they've all been in the news, and this is just a sequential timeline. I'd like you to think about those areas when it comes to those requirements to lead yourself, those requirements of leading people in the organization, leading projects and programs, and effectively communicating. Um, Look at these things, and I'd like you to think about which of those application processes were compromised, and then if you had to walk into the organization, if somebody called you up and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come to Tesla. We'd like you to give us your three recommendations, your first three recommendations for the company," what would they be, and why would you give those? When you look at these things, you're going to say, well, gosh, there's a lot here. We've got, an individual who arguably makes some errors in communication, makes some errors in judgment. There was people around him. It's not like he works in a bubble. And then you have the other effects of this. Actions create reactions. Decisions have consequences. And in this case, I think the metric that we put there is stocks and of course job changes. So when you look at those things, it's extremely important to understand what were the other factors that were going on here. If you've got a great brand name, you're a brilliant human, you got a brand that everybody knows, and the company's growing and really evolving. What are the other things that are potentially going on here? And then how do you make the right recommendations? We don't have to get into Elon Musk's case study. What we need to understand is on any given day in your company, there are things that are going exceptionally well, and there are things that are causing challenges. The ability to look at things, how those things map out, what's going exceptionally well, and then those areas of focus, and then having the process by which you make changes and direct so that you can eliminate those things that are going to cause your company to fail, or those things are going to change the culture of your company. That's where leaders and managers are spending a great deal of time. So the case study, lead yourself, lead people, projects and programs, the organization and communication. You get some time and we see each other in January, I'd definitely like to go over your thoughts on that. And I'll bring that slide with me as we talk about the Elon Musk case study. As you move forward, a few things that I'll leave you with today. One, you own your narrative, and that's your narrative for yourself, your leadership philosophies, and your organization. You own it. A lot of times, I'll talk to leaders who are unsure what their narrative is or what they want to achieve, and I'll say, visualize where you want your organization to go. Visualize the leader that you know you are and the one you're going to be, you will be in the future, and then conduct yourself accordingly and orient your organization that way. Celebrate the behaviors and the desired effects in your team. So those things that are going well, celebrate those. You get what you celebrate. Receive and send updates on programs and projects and apply standards. Standards are extremely important, and leaders apply standards where none exist. They create and apply them. Focus and apply time to the greater good. Eliminate telepathy and strive to achieve balance. With that being said, and I realize we're over time, I'll take your questions.
It looks like we've answered most of them. A couple of you have reached out about the slides. Yes, they will be available after today's session. You'll get a confirmation email in a couple hours with the materials.
Yep. And one thing yes, ma'am. One other thought. Hey, I know when we are together in January, we're going to take these many of these behaviors or many of these application cycle, all 5 stages, and we're going to dive into those. In essence, we're going to model, we're going to map, model, and apply the behaviors that you can walk out of the door with, walk back to your company and put forth. And I think it's going to be a fantastic undertaking. It's going to talk about the positive effects of behaviors, and you'll leave with best practices of the people around you, what they're doing with these in this process, in these application cycles, and you're going to walk away with your own handbook of the tasks and the methodology that you want to apply, and you're going to have perspective on how that'll work in your space. It's going to be a very productive 3 days we'll spend together when I see you in January, and I'm looking forward to that time. And if it matters, I'm already training to get ready for our morning session, so should be great. Minus your questions. That's all I have.
Thank you, Terri. Thank you to today's webinar sponsors, Interlogics and Honeywell. And we look forward to seeing you all in January in Austin. Head over to esasummit.com to register today. Have a great day, guys.
Bye-bye.